Welcome everyone to the N64brew Summer Game Jam. Like in our previous jams, our participants had roughly 2 months to make a game designed to run on official Nintendo 64 hardware. It's an interesting challenge considering that these games are made from the ground up with limited tools, many of which are specifically written for this jam, and they have numerous technical challenges to face. This year, due to scheduling issues and in the spirit of experimenting a little bit with our jam format, we opted to have the community vote on the submissions instead of having our usual round of guest judges. So this year, interviewing our participants will only be me, Lorenzo, aka Boo342. I am a moderator at the N64brew server and a homebrew developer myself. And unfortunately, this year we were not able to have the interviews done before announcing the winners. So this year the interview is sort of a post-mortem of the jam entries. But as is usual with all of our game jams, all projects are open source, so you can compile these entries and learn from them in case you decide to get into N64 homebrew development. Our top 3 entries this year were Alien Sun in 3rd place, Megatextures demo in 2nd place, and Summer Story in 1st place. Our final prize pot was $776.76. And the first place winners chose to donate the proceeds to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's research, helping the fight against an awful disease. One of our participants this year, Lambert James D., decided to raffle an EverDrive X7 flashcard to anyone who submitted an entry, as long as they didn't already own one. And in the spirit of trying to get people to submit, no matter how crappy they think their submissions are. After all, the point of these game jams is to get homebrew out there so that people can learn from these submissions, but also to have people have fun. The raffle winner ended up being DC All, who coincidentally is a member of this year's first place team. An interesting thing about this year's entries was that while we had a smaller number of entries, we only had 6, for the first time ever we had an overwhelming number of entries opt to use LibDragon, specifically 5 of the 6 entries. To give a little bit of context, there are 2 main SDK options for the Nintendo 64, LibUltra and LibDragon. LibDragon is an SDK that is written entirely by the community. It's free and open source and is currently actively developed. The LibDragon team managed to get OpenGL working on the system sometime last year, but this year they pushed out a bunch of improvements and tools in order to make it an easier experience for the users to get their assets working. Alright, I think our participants are waiting for us to get started, so let's go ahead and bring them in so that we can discuss their projects.
I'm James Lambert. I did the coding for our entry.
And I'm Jeff Nichter, and I did the music for this one.
And then another team member, she's not here, Caitlin, or another tag is Sapphire. She did the stained glass windows for the tech demo.
Alright, so your project was the Megatextures tech demo.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, and so tell us how you interpreted the theme of this year's jam.
Right, so the summer theme, basically, I knew I wanted to do the Megatextures tech demo even before the jam started, and I just figured, like, I'll just use the jam as an opportunity to implement it. And I was trying to come up with a good scene for what to do. And I just always imagined a chapel with stained glass windows would be a really good showcase of high resolution textures, because you can put more details in the windows and you can have like the light bleeding out, the colorful light bleeding out. And so I figured like the chapel would be a really cool environment to do this in. And then the theme was announced and I'm like, how do I do a demo that fits the theme? Because I was always thinking of outdoors environments and I didn't want to, I don't know. And so I just decided, whatever, I'm just going to theme it. Just put summer stained glass windows in and call it good, and just design the rest of the environment to be summer. But that was the extent to how the theme. We tried to follow the theme. There was no gameplay that I could think of that would fit summer as well. So that's just the extent of the theme there.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my comments, is that your submission is a bit more of a demo. You didn't end up getting a game in there, and I was going to ask if that was because of time constraints or you just simply couldn't get something working.
Well, it was mostly time constraints. I mean, I had the final entry finished well before the deadline, and so if I wanted to scramble, I probably could have added some sort of like simple puzzle that you have to find things and pick them up and use them in the right places or fix stained glass windows or something. But at that point, I'm like, I was kind of busy with other things, and like I'm happy with just the state of the demo. I wish I could put some gameplay in, and yeah, I think that's the extent of how far I wanted to take it, and it worked for me.
There was a point kind of the last week of when we were going that I had an idea for some interactivity, but I realized it was probably too much to ask for at that point. And my idea, so I was working on like, how am I going to make music for this space? And we were talking about Gregorian chant, and I wondered if like you could come up with like a toy almost where like if you walk across tiles, like one tile has one note, and so the person comes up with music as they're walking. And I don't know, I kind of bailed out of like the time it would take to figure that out on both ends, the technical side and the creative side.
Yeah, I was kind of sweating a little bit as the scores were coming in, because we do have a rule against demos, since it's a game jam, and I was a bit afraid that if your Megatextures demo ended up winning, then that would be big and controversial. But overall, like the whole point of the jam is to get source code out there. That's just the main point. So to me, it's sort of an interesting thing to think about if it would have ended up winning. But you guys did come second place, which was congratulations, by the way.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I frankly was like aiming for third, because I agree with you. I didn't want to win first. Like, this is just a tech demo. It's not a game. So first place wouldn't feel right to me either. Yes, I'm glad. I thought the first place entry deserved it. I thought they did a great job. So I'm glad we didn't take that.
Yeah, another interesting thing about your submission is that it was the only submission not to use LibDragon this year. And I'm assuming that is mostly due to technical debt, as in all of your tools are already working for libultra.
Yes, exactly. I've been building in libultra for years now, and so like I'm just familiar with it. I have my own workflows, and I figured it out. So like yeah. And I mean, LibDragon's getting more tempting and maybe if LibDragon added multi-threading, and I'm trying to think of other features, multi-threading, and if the rendering, if they got the rendering to be nice and efficient with some pre-computed display lists, I'm sure they have some of those features already. I haven't looked into it, but there's just a few things that I feel like on my list of wants before I'd consider jumping over, but it's getting closer, so I might try it one of these years.
Yeah, LibDragon has seriously come a long way since. And were there any interesting challenges or rewarding experiences out of this project? I know you did the video covering a lot of the technical explanation of how the system works.
Yeah. Well, the idea for Megatextures was floating around in my head for a while, and so it was really just kind of fun to see it happen. And I had no idea if it would actually be performant at all. Like if I would implement it and it'd run at like 5 frames a second or 5 frames a second, or just something like that. Like I didn't even know if it was possible. I mean, I told the team that at the beginning, like, hey, I have this idea I want to try. There's a chance that we implement it and it just completely falls apart and just doesn't work. But they're on board. So I was happy to see it actually work, and I was able to do 640 by 480 resolution, which is not common for N64, and still have decent frame rates doing that. So I was actually surprised. I was expecting, maybe 20 frames per second at the lower resolution, but it worked pretty well. So I was really happy to see that.
All right, cool. I don't think I have any other questions. So once again, thank you for participating this year. I hope you had a wonderful time with our jam.
Yeah, I did. Now, thank you for organizing it.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure. All right, take care.
I am Ali. I'm from Turkey. This is my second time attending the jam. And I wasn't much sure about joining or participating this year, especially after seeing the theme, because it was a difficult one in my opinion. But after some time, an idea popped up in my mind. So at least I started thinking about this idea where there were some hidden objects. Actually, I was planning to do a hidden object game at first, but while thinking about it, I come up with this idea where the objects are hidden under the sand because the theme was summer. So I was trying to fit it some game idea into it. Then I started pitching the idea to a few people in the Discord and met DC and a few other guys that were left the team afterwards. So we go for a kind of a walking simulator in a first-person view where you try to find some items under the sand. But let's hear from DC as well and his viewpoint.
Okay, so I'm DC, or better known as David, and I'm just a 3D modeler for the team that is now Polygon Sandwich, and I just do some 3D modeling, and I saw some news about the game jam, and I thought I'd just throw myself out there and see if anyone needed some help with anything, and I could model some assets, and that's how I got involved with Summer, and that's about my side of the story. Yeah.
By the way, nice to meet you, DC.
Yeah, it's been too long.
All right, very cool. And tell us a little bit about how you took our theme summer and you interpreted it for your entry.
So I have a daughter named Summer, and after coming with the idea that you will dig something from the sand, I thought it might be a kid, and it also fit well in the theme. So the girl's name is Summer. It's in an abandoned island where there is a lot of sun. So it relates to summer, but it's not exact. It's not an exact match for the theme, maybe. But then I go with the name of the girl to match the theme. So that's the idea.
Okay, very cool. And you did mention that you guys were originally a bigger team, but you ended up downscaling. So you've had some difficulties and anything worth talking about, or?
Yeah, there were two other guys from Discord. One was an audio guy who said that he will do some music and some sound effects, but after a while we couldn't hear from him, so we had to leave him out. And the other one was a narrative designer, which would fit the game pretty well. But I think there were some real life issues that he was dealing with, and he had to leave the team. But I was just trying to find more and more people to join the jam, and that was my purpose. Also, it makes making a game much easier, because I have participated as a solo before, and it's a very stressful situation because you need to do everything. But at least this time we were together with DC, and he did the modeling, and he also helped a lot with the game design and playtesting it. So it was a cool experience.
Added quite a bit to the scope of the project too, with suggestions, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but you guys did end up pulling it off, and you got in first place, so congratulations.
Thank you. To be honest, I wasn't expecting that, because it didn't play well in our tests. Especially the puzzles were not clear for the people. But somehow a few people from the server was able to do it.
Yeah, from about 30-ish votes that we ended up getting, your team ended up prevailing. So it might have been that people just simply resonated more with your entry and the story.
Probably, yeah. And I have heard some comments about the game being different from the other N64 games, being a story-driven game.
Yes,
So,
that wasn't very common.
Yeah, it's not your usual Nintendo 64 game, so it was a different take, which was an experiment, to be honest. And when I pitched it to DC, he liked the idea, but we were not very sure about not what to do next. So it ended up okay, I think.
Awesome. Another question that I had is that your team ended up using LibDragon for your SDK, and I want to know a little bit about how the experience was, both for the programmer and the modeler, and any suggestions that you might have for the LibDragon team in case they are listening to this interview.
I would say it was a really pleasant experience developing the game. There were some rough edges here and there. Especially I had to fork the model importer. There is an experimental model importer right now which converts a GLTF file into a LibDragon compatible model file. But it wasn't possible to use it as is because it doesn't have any collision data, and I wanted to be able to move on the terrain. Also, there is some dynamic terrain editing in the game, as you know. So that was not directly possible with the existing tooling. So I had to fork the tool and change it a little bit to match our use case. But once I did that, it was pretty easy to develop the other parts because it was only a single blend file that we keep, and everything is based on that. So, for example, if I change some object plates in the Blender, it's immediately visible in the next build. So it was a nice experience at that point. So we already had some discussion around how we can make some dynamic meshes in LibDragon, and also the possibility to add some custom data to the mesh data, such as collision. We are still discussing about those, but if you are listening, yes, these features are nice to have. I also want to hear from DC because this is his first jam, so maybe he has something to say.
Yes, I was going to bother DC afterwards.
I actually just got a notification that my headset's on low battery, so hopefully I'll hang in here with you guys. But yeah, for me, it's been fantastic. At first we tried to keep the polygon count really low, and it seemed to work fine. No matter how much we had to bump it up, and also we had a lot of issues with Z fighting, but I think again that's more to do with the limitations in the Nintendo 64 hardware itself, and not so much LibDragon. But at my end, it was a very straightforward process. It was amazing to, have the poly data and the vertex shading, and I could send it straight over, and it would appear in game straight away. It appeared to be no issues at all. It was fantastic.
Yeah, hats off to LibDragon developers, I would say.
Awesome. And last question, but did you find any interesting challenges or rewarding experiences throughout the jam?
Actually, the tutorial part was something that teach something to me. So I have tried. In general, I don't like tutorials, but in the last jam I attended, it was the major problem with the game. No one get it how to play the game. So this time I was more concerned about the tutorial, and I tried to do something better. I'm not sure if it is perfect, but it goes something like, if you don't do anything, it will try to show you what to do. Like, for example, if you just wait, it will say you can look around with the analog stick, and if you don't move around for some time, it will say that you can move around with the arrow buttons. So if you are familiar with the controller and familiar with playing games, you can immediately start playing and you won't see those tutorial lines. Also, there is a single button in the game, and once we start the game, after hearing the first or after reading the first dialogue, you are prompted to press Z to continue, and after that point, everything is done with the Z button. So it also pushes the player to put his or her hand onto the controller. And I think it was a good tutorial sequence, but that was something to try out for me. So that's a learning experience for me.
Yeah, I remember there were some minor complaints about the controls because they were a bit unconventional.
Yes, unconventional for the system, but I thought it was a modern control layout, so I'm not sure about it. But Tony not being able to play the game is concerning, that's for sure.
All right. I don't have any other questions. So thank you to both of you for participating this year in our game jam. I hope you had a good experience.
Yeah, it was a very good experience.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's been great.
My name's Wade, and the Discord Wade Taihan, and the project that we put together was Sand City, and the concept of that was to basically do a city builder with sandcastles rather than traditional cities, of course. And CRB did help out with the music and the sound effects, so I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself in the text chat real quick. Yep, so as he says in the text chat, he's Bryce, B-R-Y-C, and C-Y-R-B in reverse. He did the music and sounds, and as he mentioned, he and I got together to decide on actually putting together a project pretty late, about 2 weeks before the end of the jam. Prior to that, I was doing a bunch of tests and was already into issues, but decided the last 2 weeks or so, we're going to actually try to build a game out of this thing. So it was pretty quick for him to go and get some things together, some music together, some sound effects together, and to get the sound and stuff implemented in there on top of all the gameplay that we could fit in at the last minute. So the main reason why we decided, I wasn't quite sure that we were going to get anything submitted was right before the jam was announced, I just started working with LibDragon and learning OpenGL for the LibDragon, the 3D version with LibDragon. And so I was trying to build out my tool set and get my engine ported over. And like a week or two afterwards, that's when the jam was announced. So a lot of the process, the early part of the jam was just trying to get the tools created, since there really weren't a whole lot of tools that existed either yet for LibDragon that had animation and things like that. And I wanted to use my own tools that I had built up over the past several years. So a lot of that was just kind of learning how LibDragon works, getting the tools ported over to work with LibDragon before I even felt like I was comfortable to build anything interactive. And once I felt okay with that we could at least get something out there, then I reached out to CYRB, who worked with me last time on Spirit Harvest for last year's entry. And I think he's typing something up again, so.
Yes.
He says that he originally wasn't going to join the jam, as July was pretty hectic for him, but in August, when I reached out, it was pretty relaxed and free, so he was up for it. So, yep, that's how we came together to put something together for the jam.
Awesome, thank you very much. And tell us a little bit about how you took the theme this year with summer and how you interpreted it for your submission.
Yeah, so it's pretty self-apparent when you look at the game. It's set on a beach in the summer. It's with building sandcastles when you got the ocean nearby. So that was kind of visually, that's the obvious way to how to do that. And then I tried to come up with some kind of theme that would work with that setting. And the first thing that came to mind that was something that I could put together that would help me build out the tools that I wanted was something along the lines of SimCity, which was a more complex simulation type of game. Most of the simulation stuff isn't really involved in this because it's just a quickly put together jam thing. But I thought it was a good way to meet the jam requirements as far as visually and also gameplay-wise, since Canned Castles is usually the type of thing you do during the summer. So.
I find it interesting because you have been participating in our jams for quite a few years, and you've always been using Lib Ultra. And this year you decided to try out LibDragon's new experimental OpenGL branch. And I want to know a little bit about what made you switch, how was the experience, and if you have any suggestions you'd like to send to the dev team who may or may not be listening to this interview.
So the reason I decided to switch is I initially wasn't decided am I going to switch, but I wanted to test it out, see how it's coming, because I did want to support. I love the idea of us having something that's developed using more modern standards, and that is developed by the community, rather us having to requiring us to use the old tools that are out of date and were built in the mid 90s and weren't really intended for homebrew development. So it was nice to support them in their development of LibDragon. They've done a lot of work in the past year or two, and I just wanted to try it out, see if I liked it. And for the most part, a lot of the stuff that is really complex to do in LibUltra is very simple in LibDragon, and that's great. They've done a great job optimizing a lot of the process, or simplifying a lot of the process for development and getting your engine running. I'd say the main thing is just the kind of things that will take time, which is just optimizing its performance itself, which I know that they've made quite a bit of progress just in the past 2 months since I started using it, and making sure that the documentation is set up for what is the most efficient way to do something. The documentation could definitely use some work, but I know it's still early, so that's not too surprising. As well as getting some good examples out there. There are some 3D examples that are there, but they're not. Most of them are not set up in the way that is the most optimized way to actually use LibDragon. So it would be great to continue getting more examples, programs that people can look at for the best way, and the types of games that they're wanting to make, having some different examples that match up with those. That would be a huge help. But as far as getting music on there, or sound effects, which was so complex in LibUltra, that alone, it took me a long time to get the music the way we wanted it in last year's entry. But this year it was so simple that he just sent over the files and it was great. We did not end up. The problem with it right now, at least at the time that we were doing it, was that compression had just been set up. The ability to compress music and sound effects, and some people were having issues with it, causing a lot of cracking, things like that. So we did not use compression for the sound effects. So almost the entire project file is music. But I think that once the compression issues are sorted out, they may already be. I have not been around much in the past month. Then I think that will save a lot of space. And Bryce says, early on we tried using the XM player in LibDragon, but it seemed like performance would be an issue. And yes, that was the case since we did have a rather complex song with a lot of instruments. The more instruments that you have, the more the XM did affect performance. So ultimately we decided to go with pre-recorded music rather than using the XM player, which if you only have a few channels, then I'm sure the XM player will work just fine. But because of the complexity of the song, it made for a very variable frame rate. So in the early part of the song, we might be getting 25 frames per second, and then when all the instruments are going at once, we're suddenly getting 18 frames per second when everything else is exactly the same. So it made quite a difference. So yeah, that could potentially be optimized as well, but we'd have to play around with that some more to see if there was something else we could do to improve that.
Okay, cool. And were there any interesting challenges or rewarding experiences in your participation?
Definitely learning OpenGL was interesting. I did very briefly play around with it in the early 2000s, but I have not touched it since then. So seeing some ways that it's similar to LibUltra was actually pretty interesting, but very different in a lot of ways as well. And so just learning that was a fun challenge, and putting together the systems for the game was a fun challenge as well. I didn't feel, like I said before, because I couldn't get quite the same level of performance that I could have at LibUltra yet. It felt a little bit more limiting than what I had done with my previous projects. But I also know that there's still a lot more for me to learn. I had 3 years practice with LibUltra prior to making that project. I'm sure that after a year or two, I'll have LibDragon and OpenGL figured out, and they'll have their optimizations done. And that I think LibDragon ultimately is probably going to be the way most people are going to be developing for N64 moving forward.
All right. And I want to make a little, common observation, but also question. In your entry is essentially a SimCity, but with crabs, and you're building sandcastles instead of building houses. One thing that a few people have pointed out, and I kind of agree with, is it's a bit of a shame that you didn't get at least some little billboard crabs walking around the city to give it a little bit more life. I'm curious if that was either just lack of time or performance issues.
Performance, yeah, it wasn't lack of time. I had the crabs modeled in 3 different stages of detail, as well as animated, but I was already having major performance issues just with having a full scene, or even a half full scene. And so I realized that it was not possible to get a bunch of moving crabs on there. So my initial thought was to have occasionally the crabs pop up, have them walk and scream whenever they move into the town. And it had a little walking animation. I've actually shared, I think, some visuals of the model in one of the channels at some point. And so that was pretty much all done. It was modeled, it was animated, but just was not possible to get it in there and keep the performance high. But again, like I said before, there's a lot more that we can learn about how to optimize LibDragon, and I know that they've made a lot of progress in the past several months to do so as well. So I think that with some more time, that it definitely could be done. Unless I wanted it to drop into the low teens, it just wasn't feasible.
All right. Well, I think that's everything. So once again, thank you for participating in our game jam this year, and I hope you had a good time.
Not a problem. Well, thanks, y'all. Bye.
So I'm Trail. Just currently in school for software development. And I just wanted a project to do over summer. So I think I saw an ad on, was it Facebook or Reddit, something like that, about the game jam, and I decided to join. I didn't really have any plans. It just kind of came up as it was going. I kind of just started making a engine, I guess. Not really an engine, but and then just kind of made what I made.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about how you took the theme of this year's jam and how you interpreted it.
So I guess one of the most obvious things about summer, I guess, is the beach. So I kind of ran with that, and I was like, oh, sandcastles are kind of something you do on the beach. I kind of like memory games a bit, so I decided to kind of make it a memory game, albeit I probably made it too difficult. But yeah, just building sandcastles was the general idea, and thought it was kind of cool how the water or the tide was coming in. I guess I grew up on the beach, or on a city on the beach, so it was always funny when the tide came in and ruined your sandcastle.
Yeah, the tide coming in actually helped bring in a little bit of tension to the game. It would have been nice to see the tide destroy the castles, though. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. With a short time frame, I assume you obviously can't do everything.
No, yeah.
Yeah, you did end up mentioning that you think you ended up making the game a little too difficult.
Yeah, I think I did. I was kind of supposed to play test it on the last day, but then my friends came over because he got engaged, and they were supposed to help me play test it, but then we got drunk, and then the next day I was too hungover to do any real play testing. So yeah, that's my reason for being difficult.
That's
And
totally fair.
of course, I was kind of blind to how hard it was since I wrote all the levels.
Okay, and this was your first time participating in the game jam.
Yep.
In our game jams, I don't know if you've participated in other game jams before.
Any game jam.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. You have hardware then?
I have an N64, but I don't have a cart, so I did most of my testing on Ares.
Okay. One question that I had was, since it was one of your first times working with the system, I assume, since you joined finding out about our jam, you had a few SDK options and you ended up going for LibDragon.
Yeah, so I read all the documentation for the jam or whatever, and it seemed like LibDragon was just sold as the easiest. So I was like, okay, I'll be down with that. And when I looked into it, there was a lot of functionality. It was a little bit confusing because there is a lot of functionality. I guess that's what kind of confused me the most, is like, oh, well, I can do this in several ways. Which way is the best way? But either way, everything was very simple to use. Even
So
like saving,
Mhm.
just like I implemented saving in like the last day or two.
So you've overall had a good experience with LibDragon?
I'd say so, yeah. I think
Okay.
most of it was just trying to figure out like what to use in LibDragon.
That I can branch it off to the next question, which is if you had any suggestions for the LibDragon dev team who might be listening to this interview or feedback.
Good question.
Ultimately, were there any parts of LibDragon that you struggled with a bit more? Maybe documentation or lack of examples?
Oh, the
Audio.
examples were great. I think just finding some of the documentation was difficult. I didn't really look though, so that's probably on me. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked all the examples. That's what really made using LibDragon easy for me. I don't think I'd have anything to critique. I didn't really use it long enough to have any sore spots with it or learn it very well. So I find it hard to critique it really at all.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And last question that I can think of right now. Did you have any challenges or any interesting or rewarding experiences from your participation?
Yeah, setting up like the tool chain and everything was pretty difficult for me, but at the same time, I learned a bit about like setting up environments in Linux and a little bit about makefiles, which I didn't have any clue. I just always been a Windows pleb. So that's kind of cool. So now I'm a little bit more interested in trying to set up environments on Linux. I think that was probably my biggest takeaway. Yeah.
All right. I don't think I have anything else to ask. So thank you very much for participating in our jam this year. I hope you stay around and make part of a bunch of other jams if we host more in the future. And yeah, well, thank you very much for being here. Hope you had a wonderful time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot for putting this on, guys.
Yeah, hi. My name's Nova. I did Alien Sun. It's a little, I'd say, the beginnings of a little physics puzzle platformer for Nintendo 64.
And did you end up doing everything? So that includes the assets and code and audio and all of that, or did you have some freebie sources?
So I did the code. I did a little bit of the art, and I did the music and the sound effects. But the assets were taken from some free asset packs on itch.io, which you can go find and use them if you want to for game jams. That's what they're made for. So I thought they were perfect. Didn't have time to do all of it, so just made that decision to use free asset packs, and it did save me some time. So.
All right, and could you tell us a little bit about how you took this year's theme and how you interpreted it?
Yeah, so it actually came to me in a dream. I was just like, I actually agonized over this for a while. I couldn't think of a good summer theme, and I just had like a dream about like a a spaceman trying to find a beach. So that was pretty much what it came from. So it was just like, how do I adapt this silly little, ridiculous, nonsensical concept and turn it into a game? And especially, like within the limitations of whatever I could scrape off the internet for art. So it was ultimately a compromise, but I think at least it worked out in my mind anyway. And so, the game ended up being, you're a spaceman and you get like thrown onto this planet and you got to find the beach. So to have a picnic with your spaceman buddies.
Yeah, I remember when you released your entry that you explained that the story wasn't super present in the game itself because you were trying to go for something old school where people had to read the manual to fully understand what's going on.
That's an ad hoc justification. If you know what I mean. Well, I say that I did want to. I did have some like. How do I say? Like there was a system in the game that I did make where there was going to be some dialogue to explain it, but that got cut, and for time constraints. But I did plan to put some text in the game that was going to be like, oh no, our ship is crashing. Oh no, what do we do? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately worked out because you did end up getting first place, so congratulations. Oh, no, wait, sorry, no, you were third place.
Yeah.
But, I mean, third place is quite good.
Oh, yeah, I don't expect... I think... I was just happy to play all the other entries, I don't come to game jams with, like, any expectations, I've done plenty of game jams where stuff, like... stuff just doesn't work, sometimes that happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can't really predict, the way game development's going to turn out. So, because it is very much a creative process. So,
Okay, so for your entry, you decided to go for LibDragon, but interestingly, you were the only 2D entry this year. Any reason that you ended up going for 2D specifically?
It was just easier. I remember playing some of the like some of the past jam entries from the N64brew jam, and the stuff I noticed was that most of the 3D entries lacked polish, and that I'd say that's pretty standard for game jams in general. I mean, on PC it's a little better because people have Unreal and Unity and stuff, and that does make it easier to make 3D games. But on N64, I do think it's harder to make a 3D game. Just from what I've seen other people do and the problems I've seen other people run into. So that was kind of like a conscious decision. The idea was actually to make it 2.5D, so there you can kind of see some of the beginnings of that. Like the water is 2.5D. There was more stuff in there, but that also got cut. I did have some like 3D stuff that was going to be like projected over the environment. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, there's not too many games that do that well on N64. Also, like, in terms of like commercial games that were released, like they either went for like the sprite based, or they did like was it 3D on a 2D plane? But I kind of wanted to do like more of a hybrid. So maybe eventually I'll post some videos of what that was supposed to look like, because I think that would have been cool, just to show off. But that was kind of the idea.
All right. Small correction to myself, but you weren't the only entry. There was a second entry as well. But you were one of the few that opted to go for this year.
The Brew Volley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for the LibDragon dev team who might be listening to this interview about what your experience of deving on LibDragon was like?
I've already kind of actually already talked to them. Like I was talking to them during the jam because we're all in the Discord, so it's cool that everyone's here and we all get to hang out. What was I? LibDragon is really high quality. It's great. I think it's awesome. In some ways, I think it's better than anything we've had before. For N64, it's what is it, that 30 years of or whatever of experience definitely pays off. I'm trying to think what I wanted to focus on. It's more, my concern is more like what would I contribute? Like I look at LibDragon as like an open source project in that way. Like I try and when I picked it for the jam, I was thinking I'm gonna contribute some stuff back, come up with some ideas of what to do. So what did we talk about? I talked about wanting to do like MIDI support. So I might look into that, ask more about that later. And that's specifically for right now. Specifically, I'd probably be looking at that for like other games to N64 that might use MIDI. Just because there's like a lot of older games in that period that do use it. And that way we can get some nice music going. What else was I thinking about? There's a couple other things like I do think there's a lot of little minor like microcode improvements that could be done. Like one to look into getting the what is it? There's a couple things that still run on the CPU pipeline in OpenGL. So probably like to help out, just figure out how we can get those running on the RSP, and because they are pretty slow right now, but I think they could be fast and they could be awesome.
Awesome. And do you have any did you run into any interesting challenges or have any rewarding experiences in this jam?
Yeah, so start with the rewarding experience. I used the physics engine Box 2D. Oh, I should have mentioned that. I didn't write the physics engine. That was like an open source project too. It's called Box 2D. It's if you've done any like game development in C++, like in this kind of environment, you probably know about it. But it's it's like a standard physics engine for 2D games. And so it was pretty rewarding to get that to work. Once it gets going, it's just like works really well. And I actually that was like a conscious reason. Another conscious reason I chose to do a 2D thing, because I figured I had actually a good chance of getting that working. Like the N64 was the only console from that period that has like an FPU, and the Box 2D is all like it requires floating point. So it was like, right, this is perfect. It'll probably fit right in, and yeah, it did. It was really rewarding. The challenge was remembering how to use it. I haven't used it in a long time, and there's a lot of quirks. Like people, one of the things I've seen people criticize in Alien Sun was that the physics are in like the controls are kind of like jank, which yeah, I totally agree. Like, and so part of the challenge there is like when you're using a physics engine, do like a physics platformer type thing, you just can't just do like I want to say like Mario type physics where like everything is like, I don't know how to describe it, like everything is just kind of like coded to the movement of the player and like centered around that. But like when you're doing like a physics platformer, like it's basically everything has to be considered as like a physical interaction first, but like it's like the opposite of what you want to do normally in like a platformer, because like the non-physical interactions are like the most fun part, like it's like the most dynamic part, and it's what makes the game unique. So it's like trying to figure out how to reconcile those two. Obviously, yeah, I didn't have enough time to get it to work effectively, but that's the challenge, right? That's like that's the whole deal. And once you can get it going, the idea is hopefully, you have something that is really dynamic and cool, but also like it feels like like real physics. Like you can push stuff around and like solve problems in a way that's like intuitive, and like it just goes together. So that was a challenging thing. I'd like to think about that more if I have time, because there's been obviously like other games have done that well that have been released, not on N64, but just like in general, and so that like be a cool thing to pursue. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it ended up being a good choice because the physics is runs really smooth.
It's amazing. I can't believe it.
And yeah, ultimately it was also very good, like to look at entry. The way that you got the parallax working was really nice. And yeah, as you pointed out, the water also looked great with the I forget what the technical term for it is, because it's not quite parallax. It's it has to do with the height that you are from the water changes the perspective of it, but it's still all done in 2D.
It's just well, that is actually using it is doing like a perspective effects. So it is using the like the triangle renderer.
Okay.
I guess you could technically call that a 3D effect. Like it's not just. And actually, I'm gonna geek out that they like you can't do that on PlayStation because it doesn't have the perspective correct texturing. But so I got to use it on N64 and like manually code it in. It's like that's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for participating this year. I hope you had a wonderful time in our jam, and hopefully we can see you for next time we host one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll see if I can fit it into my plans.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me.
All right, take care.
You too.